Hi, my name is John Mancini. I'm the past president of AIIM, and I do the Industry Watch series for AIIM now. And so what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a look behind the scenes of our new report of You're Working Too Hard, Using Intelligent Automation to Save Time, Money, and Effort. And when you're done looking at this, make sure that you download the ebook because it'll give you a lot of detail about some of the themes that I'll talk about here today. So what I'd like to start with, as I think is an important point, is that organizations need to look at content services and process services in tandem. They're kind of connected. They've always been connected. I remember using a graphic a long time ago where I talked about BPM and ECM in the context of that old Reese's peanut butter cup ad where you're getting chocolate in my peanut butter, you're getting peanut butter in my chocolate. And that's really the case with content services and process services. They go together. So where I usually like to start this story is by talking about digital transformation. And so when we talk to people, people clearly get that something is going on, something needs to change. They also understand that they are dealing with a huge influx of information into their organizations. In this case, over the next 2 years, they anticipated going from X to 4.2X, big jump in information. They also are recognizing the fact that this is unstructured and semi-structured information and new kinds of information like audio and video. And so that combination represents a really dynamic challenge when you start thinking about business processes. And it's reflected in this data point. You know, if something as basic as getting the right information to the right person in context, that in context being an important point, is a problem for 75% of organizations. So as we talk to people and as we try to analyze what some best practices are, we thought we'd put 4 of these together and illustrate them with data. So the first one is that it is really important, this is true of any enterprise implementation, but particularly in this arena, is you need to start with a realistic assessment of where you currently are. Because not organizations are starting in the same place, they're all starting in very different places, and you have to be realistic about that. And so this question, I think, reflects an interesting data point. You know, we've been doing process automation for a long time. On the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see a lot of typical processes within organizations. And we asked folks to indicate how automated are those processes. And so you can see in the dark blue on the left side, the dark gray on the left side, you know, those are basically some of the leaders in terms of organizations that think those processes are mostly automated. But you go to the other side of the coin and you can see there's an awful lot of manual process still out there. It's really indicative when you start looking at differences between high-performing and low-performing organizations. One of the questions we asked in our survey was ask people to self-assess their performance relative to peer organizations. And so what you can see here is that there are challenges clearly on lagging organizations, but even in leading organizations, a high degree of manual processes in those organizations. So second best practice is to go down that path that I talked about earlier, is integrate process automation initiatives with your efforts to tackle the rising tide of chaos, and kind of vice versa as well. And so let me give you a couple of ideas there. So the first one is to be cognizant of the fact that semi-structured and unstructured information represents a significant obstacle in your efforts to automate. I've seen far too many organizations try to go down the automation path without going down the path of also automating the management of the information that underlies those processes. And that creates a huge challenge for organizations moving forward. When we ask questions like this is a whole series of questions that are really tied, I think, to the intersection of process services with content services. And so this question of, you know, is it easy for you to integrate capture technologies, how information comes into the organization, with your line of business applications? Significant challenge for lots of folks. You know, can you turn that information into actionable data? Can you take unstructured information and add structure, add metadata to it? That's a significant challenge. And then I guess these last 2 points, dealing with the variety and volume of information, remains a significant challenge for many organizations. The third best practice, I think, is to, there's a temptation sometimes to focus on process automation as only a source of cost savings. That's the driver for it. And certainly that's an important benefit, and it's an immediate benefit. It helps sell systems. That's not a bad thing. But I think there's also data that suggests that you have to position those automation efforts at a higher order as well, and deal with some of the issues that the C-suite cares about, things like data quality, information security, improved customer experiences, because process automation is definitely tied to those high order objectives, those strategic objectives that businesses have. So when you ask this question, which 3 of the following reasons for undertaking a process automation project are the most important? And I think this data is pretty interesting. Again, they highlight, bottom of the chart there, data quality, customer service, reducing manual errors. That's a combination of both tactical and strategic reasons for undertaking process automation. And recognizing that, being cognizant of that, and selling that in the organization, I think is key towards getting funding for some of these projects. When you ask this question of, I get this all the time, where do I start? And, one indicator is to look at, where's your hair on fire? And so we ask this question, in which of the areas is automation most urgent in your organization? And there's some interesting underlying trends here. First of all, finance, accounts payable, and invoice processing. Bread and butter issues associated with process management and content management. This records management and preservation. I think underlying that is a sense that there has to be more automation in the management of all that chaos, and that chaos as it rises within the organization. And I think that point coming up high with relative to logistics, A, it's a place where there's a heck of a lot of paper in many organizations, but B, it's an important customer-facing process in organizations. So the last thing I think is that there's a lot of conversation out there right now that about moving on beyond ECM and BPM. And I don't know that it's really a question of moving beyond it. It's just mainly a question, I think, of updating some of our definitions to reflect where people are trying to go with these technologies. So when you think about this, we asked people to rate the importance of each of these 4 process services building blocks to some core processes, core back-end processes, things like finance and AP, HR, governance, customer service. And the interesting thing about this is that BPM still rates pretty highly in that environment. And I think the challenge there is that I think what's underlying that data is that people are trying to say that business process management, kind of like ECM for that matter, has come to define so many things that they've got to unravel it a bit. They've got to understand how they deliver those kind of capabilities in a much more modular and less monolithic way than they ever have before. And so the area is still important. How people want to consume it, I think, is changing. And that brings into play things like RPA, brings into play things like low-code processing. And so, again, process automation still key, BPM still key, frankly, but a new version of BPM and some layers on top of BPM that makes it more productive. Very high satisfaction with a lot of these solutions. I was kind of surprised about this, actually, because these are pretty complicated solutions in organizations. 4-point scale, you can see pretty high evaluations of people that say they have a solution in place already. So that's good news for people that are looking to go down this path. Do you currently have a solution? This is also good news, I think, frankly, for people that sell solutions, is that there are an awful lot of people that are exploring their options or actively looking for solutions in the customer set that we talk to in the survey process. So again, we tend to think of a lot of these as mature technologies. Certainly there's a certain degree of maturity. Certainly they need to be updated. Certainly they need to adopt more modular approaches. But there's a lot of greenfield opportunity out there as well. The last data point is that I wanted to kind of punctuate this a bit before closing, is that organizations are trying to take process management capabilities and democratize them. And the concept that a lot of folks put around this is this idea of citizen developer. Now, I would say that that's not really like every single person becomes a process automation person. But what I think it does say is that organizations have an interest in enabling their business analysts to drive process improvement without necessarily having to touch base with IT at every step of the way. And it's also a question of putting tools in the hands of people at the everyday level that allow them to automate some of the basic chores that are pretty rote in their day-to-day business lives. That's really, I think, at the core of some of the issues that people have had with early successes with RPA, for example. So in summary, as you think about this, I think some of the key takeaways, start with a realistic assessment. Think about content services and process services in tandem with each other. Don't neglect a higher order sell as you position processes. Cost savings, yeah, you'll get that, but also position this in terms of important strategic benefits like data quality, information security, and customer experiences. And then lastly, update your stack. Focus on embracing the next generation of these tools. Focus on how you can use low-code and RPA in conjunction with your BPM and ECM implementations to basically take them to the next level. Thank you very much. This is John Mancini on behalf of AIIM, and make sure that you download the ebook. We would like to thank the underwriters of this research, without whose help we wouldn't be able to offer the research for free. So thanks so much. Check out their websites and see what they have to offer. Thanks.